live in LA now, so that's a thing.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. You recently moved out there, right? And so, yeah. And what are you doing out there now?
So I work for an NGO. We do. It's called. I always like to go to places that are super generic to me. It's called Nutrition Education International.
Okay.
We do like mostly nutrition work in Afghanistan, actually.
Really?
So yeah, I'm going to I'm going to Kabul on Tuesday.
Holy crap! So, is the point of the NGO is to educate the Afghanis about, nutritional information
So
and
long story short, my boss is this guy that worked for. He's from South Korea. For Nestle for a long time. And he has from patents and stuff. He took an early retirement in 2003, and basically recognizing that Afghanistan is one of the countries that suffers the worst from protein energy malnutrition.
really.
He started this NGO and he introduced soybeans into Afghanistan, like seeing if they could grow or not, just because there's a big like history of them in China, South Korea, and Japan, and it grew well. And soybeans is one of the only non-animal protein sources that gives you all 9 essential amino acids. And so basically, it's just been a long, arduous work of like incorporating that into their diet. And now they have a bunch of factories over there. And then we also have a youth development program through the U.S. Embassy. The main funder for this is the South Korean government. So yeah, I mean that's like the 30,000 feet version of it. The actual
Right.
like bare bones, doing it is a lot harder than that.
No, yeah. So, are you on the sort of business development side, or?
So I'm the program. My title is program coordinator. So basically, I basically took like a jump down in title, but like an increase in responsibilities from what I was doing before. So yeah, I mean, I'm mostly just I'm managing the programs essentially. And a lot of that in a country like Afghanistan just involved putting out different fires, I guess, a lot.
Yeah, well, a lot of
Because every
management.
day
Yeah.
just things come up that you don't really think would come up. But yeah, and I mean, I've been here 3 months, so I'm still learning what I do every day, I guess
Right.
you could say. So,
That's interesting. And before this, what were you doing?
so before this, I had 2 jobs. I was working as the executive director of a sobriety foundation, which they basically just gave scholarships to people to go to like sober living homes, which are commonly called halfway houses.
Right.
I wasn't there for very long, and I was also working part time as development director for this other international development organization called Lesebugu Alliance, which is in Mali in West Africa. And Sobriety Foundation, actually, I got fired in March. It was the first time in my life I got fired. So that was
Hopefully
that
not
was
for
kind of
drinking or something.
uh,
Hopefully not for drinking. Just
no,
kidding.
no, nothing to do with that.
No.
I basically just spread myself too thin. I was trying to do too much,
Yeah,
and
that
so I
happens.
didn't end up really being able to give 100% to anything. So yeah, and it kind of was an interesting way that I got led out here. Basically I was with Leslie Google Lines, which is a part-time job, and I was still working with them, and they somehow found out that I was looking for other work because it was part-time, and I was like, well, I can't just do this anyways. So
Yeah.
then I got hired for another job actually back in Salt Lake to start in June, and the week before I was supposed to start, they called me and they were like, hey, so we met with the board, and it turns out we don't actually have the budget for your position anymore. And I was like, oh, that's
Oh
kind of a
shit. Yeah.
bummer. Yeah. And so, yeah, I was unemployed for basically June and July, and then I got this job in August. So I
Nice.
moved out to LA. Here I am.
Awesome. Cool. And so you've been doing a lot of work with NGOs. Is this something that you've kind of taken on as a career path, you think, or is it just something that's interesting?
So that was like the goal. think I had a lot more idealized view of it than when I actually started doing it.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you're going to be doing this, like, oh, I'm literally like saving people's lives, and it's
Right,
so much
right. Like
just like,
every day, I'm picking up
yeah,
an African child
and
off of his
yeah,
dirt
it's
trodden
like
floor and lifting him up
because
onto a new bed I built him. Yeah.
essentially, so my dad used to plan a lot of mission trips when I was like a teenager,
Right.
and I went on a bunch of those, and I've always been one of those people with like a super restless mind, and I have like the hard time just like chilling out, like other people are just like, yeah, I'm gonna relax, and it's really hard for me to relax because my mind's always going like 1,000 miles an hour. And when I was on one of these trips, I was like 18, and I was in like the Peruvian rainforest, and I was like supervising kids playing soccer, and I was just like, I feel like legitimately happy with my life right now, and I don't have those like that many moments of peace. So that was kind of like my moment. And then I did study abroad in Europe, and like every different country I went to, I realized that I was like getting like a dictionary from them, or just I was just like fascinated with the fact that because I mean, you probably don't know it as much growing up in Canada, but like in America, growing up here, you basically think you're the only thing, right? And then,
Yeah.
but I grew up in a more multicultural home because my mom's from the U.S., but my dad's not. So I kind of always felt this little bit of conflict to like figure out, I guess, because I'm obviously white, but I never felt like every other like white American, I guess. And so just going over and like discovering all these cultures and stuff, I basically led me to study international communication at Walla Walla. But then after I graduated, I was like, what can I actually do with this? Like, is this even a thing? Right. So, so then actually my
Yeah,
dad
I've always wondered that. Like I never really understood. Like, what are you gonna do? Oh, I'm gonna work for companies and help them manage stuff. Okay.
Help them be yeah, it's kind of like so. It was. I think it was honestly like great, very well intentioned, but they didn't think it through all the way, like the program.
Or like there wasn't. It seemed like there wasn't any like. It's all just in the classroom. Like whereas that kind of degree, you kind of need to go off for a year and like actually communicate internationally.
Like, they tried to like mix things, but so basically it was like mass comm, so like journalism, TV stations, all that stuff, with like mixed with like foreign language requirements and like some kind of like international studies type stuff, which like theoretically sounds nice, but in practice it wasn't the greatest, I guess.
So,
not that it wasn't
like,
the greatest, like it was a good time.
But it was missing things, I guess.
It's almost like one of those undergrad degrees that you just like, well, I need to get a master's, I guess. And I kind of reached that conclusion, not even of myself. It was just my dad was talking to me once, and like the classic like parent conversation, like, what are you gonna do with your life type thing.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was like, well, and he was just like, look in your master's. And I was like, because I even took 5 years to do my undergrad. So because I did a double major, which is kind of stupid, actually.
Yeah, we did. I think we were there the same. We did the same thing because I did the exact same thing. 5 years, two degrees. Yeah.
Okay. When did you start?
09, I think.
Okay. Maybe that was the year, because I started 08.
Okay, yeah, so you're ahead of me. Yeah. Oh, so you're in like Mark McMillan's class and those guys. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's it. And so yeah, I mean, like I basically was coaxed into like thinking about a master's degree, and I didn't really want to do it. But then I looked at U of U because I'm from Utah, University of Utah, and they had a Master's of Science in International Affairs and Global Enterprise, which I was just like, what the hell is that, right? And I looked into it, and the classes all sound super interesting and like right up my alley. So I took it, but then honestly, even that degree was kind of like vague and like, what does this mean? Which there's more and more like college degrees that people are like, what does that really mean? Like, what are you gonna do with that, right? Like, you're an engineer, right?
Now I'm a physicist, but yeah, I have an engineering degree and a physics degree. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're like the other side of the brain then.
Right. Yeah.
Right? They like sodomized that. Because, dude, honestly, like, it was all I could do to pass, like, physics in high school. Like, I just knew from a very young age that I was, like, an artistic person. And it's not, like, science was never... And it sucks, because I wish I had, like, the capacity to, like, understand things scientifically more. But I just realized that I'm way out of my depth. Like, I'm like, I don't know.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if you had this similar experience that so I'm doing my master's right now, and
Oh, okay.
I wonder. So I worked for an engineering company so I was working as an engineer, worked for an engineering company for 3 years, and then
I think when I was up there in Abbotsford, that's what you were doing.
yeah.
Because I was up there a couple years back.
Yeah. When you were there, I was in the thick of it at working on that engineering project. And so I'm doing a master's right now, and I've found that like really unless you know specifically what you want to do, a master's is really disheartening no matter what path you're in. At least like that's kind of my takeaway, because like at the first year in this program, I was just like, this is such a waste of time. Like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I was like, okay, it's super interesting, and like at least I learned a bunch of new stuff, but it's kind of a big pay cut to take just for kicks. So, but now I'm like, I have a project that I really like, and I'm like probably gonna do a PhD, and so finding that like narrow path to go down where I know where I want my career to go, or at least I know like the general field where I'm trying to work in, and I know what the jobs are like, and I know what where I want to take it is motivating for the degree. I don't know if you found anything like that, or if you're kind of expecting like you felt like maybe there was a lack of direction in the program. Did you feel like that slowed you down?
My master's program or wall?
Master's program, yeah.
So my master's program was like an interesting, like just melange of people, I guess. Like, we were all kind of in the same, like, well, we like this stuff, but so basically people, and this is the way it was sold to me, and this is kind of the way it's been, at least in my, and it's it's a relatively young program. So it was started at University of Utah in like 2009, like 10-ish years ago, something like that. And which, I mean, as far as for university, it's been around since like the 1800s. That's pretty new. And it was founded by this guy, and he actually passed away in like I think 4 or 5 years ago. And so the direction of the program, I mean, I think that the director had the title interim director for like 5 years. It's like, at what point you just become the director,
right? And
you're no longer interim. But essentially, like, people who did that program were like one of 3 career paths. They were either going into like foreign service, so for the government, or like international business, or like the NGO route. And the NGO route was what I was always kind of my like end game. Like, it was like I had all these other things I like to do, but that was like the end game. And this is the first job that I've actually had that's like really in the thick of it. Because the one in Salt Lake, it was like such a small kind of like mom and pop type organization that it was like, I'm really not. I mean, I'm like, I am, but I'm not really that into it. Like, we're just, and not to like knock them or anything. It's just too small to be like really in the thick of it. And this organization, like, I mean, I'm communicating with like people from the UN and like the government, and it's just like, it's like real, I guess, what I had imagined. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of the goal. And now that I'm here, it's just kind of like, it's kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
Yeah, but overwhelming is much more preferable to boredom, I guess, too.
Yeah. I mean, that's true, but I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah. It's stressful, right? I remember being in the thick of this engineering project worked on a couple years ago, where it was like, just I couldn't do enough work. Like, I've never been like that in my life, where like I actually could not get all the work done. It's just like I'm working like 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. and I just like cannot finish all the work. There's too many emails, too many whatever. It's like,
oh yeah, dude.
And like, when you can't stop thinking about work, it's like, oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good though. So would you say, so I imagine like the fundamental problem of all NGOs is funding, right? Like, who funds you, and like how do you constantly get funding? But is your smirk make me think maybe that's not the case?
No, it's really interesting, because like this organization, when I learned about it, I was just like, what? Because the main, like, all NGOs kind of, I mean, all nonprofits even, like, funding is like the first thing they think of, right? Like, it's because obviously you can't do anything if you don't have funding.
Right.
And so even my first experience working in a nonprofit, well, like a legit, because I worked for a university, but that's not like traditionally, although that's really a nonprofit, that's not what you like traditionally think of as a nonprofit, right?
Right.
I guess because not people usually associate nonprofits with charities, even though it's not really the same thing. But yeah, so my first
what is the distinction between a nonprofit and a charity?
So basically, a nonprofit is just anything like that. So not 501c. It's like all has to do with the tax code. It's probably different in Canada, but in the U.S. it's like 501c3 is like a charitable nonprofit, and then you have different codes, which is like 501c6, and then like which would be like a social enterprise type thing, and then you have 501. I forget which is which, but I think 501c4, like even like the political action committees are nonprofit, and like so universities are nonprofit, so they get like tax breaks. It's basically like a tax like it has to do with the tax code, because the lines are getting kind of blurred even as to what constitutes a nonprofit. You have like Tom's Shoes, right, which is not a nonprofit, but kind of like is a charitable mission. Right. So, but like the traditional, like what comes to people's mind when you think of nonprofit is a 501c3.
And the Tom's guy, he's doing some other big thing now. I just saw he's doing some, I forget what it is, but
oh really?
Yeah, he was on Jimmy Fallon or one of those shows, and he's got a whole new initiative with guns. He's gonna put a bunch. Maybe he donated $15 million or a bunch of money to foundations trying to reduce the gun violence in schools, something like that. Yeah.
Well, that's definitely a need, but I didn't like Tom's model. I'm totally against the Tom's model, but that was just let's kill the local economy and just give out a bunch of stuff. So, but
that, and like all the while simultaneously dipping into American consumerism and like its problems, right?
Yeah, it was like it was good intention, but I actually think that he like kind of reneged. Like I thought I was reading an op-ed by him where he kind of realized like, oh my bad. Like I think he.
I mean,
wasn't doing it.
Like, there's gonna be pros and cons. Like, it's not like I get into this debate sometimes with people here, like, about like where, like, at what level of analysis do you like cast blame, or do you like decide that something is like a net good or a net evil, right? So like for Tom's, it's like, okay, obviously he had good intentions, right? So you can't fault him for that. And then, but like, did he consider all possible outcomes and effects of his shoes campaign? Like, no. He was like probably an idealistic kid, and he was like, hey, I can give a shoe away because my profit margin is greater than 200%, so it's fine. And so he does that, and then he's like, oh shit, yeah, African people can't make shoes, but also they can't buy shoes, so it's kind of like there's got to be a trade-off there, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you get into like conversations about like the Iraq War and stuff. It's like, well, we meant well, but didn't do that.
Good intentions, man. Like,
yeah,
it's that was actually something that was really apparent to me when I went to Beirut. I went there like pretty. In hindsight, I was like super naive. Like I was very much like I still had this kind of like, yeah, we're trying to help and da-da-da. And you're there for like a month and you realize that it's just like all almost like borderline propaganda. Like honestly, and this is something we used to talk about in my master's too. It's kind of like the price of like American hegemony, in that like at what point do you kind of have to just like impose your will on the world to keep in power? You know, like just impose like your influence. Like where's that balance? Because then if you don't, then there's just a power vacuum and somebody else is going to take it. And who's to say if the world will be more benevolent or not if there's like a China in power or a, you know, like who knows?
Yeah. Right. So, can you tell me stories about Lebanon? Because I don't know anything about really Lebanese. I think was that where you were going when you came to Canada? Because you came to Canada to fly out of Vancouver, right? Oh, you were going to Brazil. That's right. Yeah.
Going to Brazil.
But I think we had talked about I remember you told me something about you like got into Syria. Yeah, because you had some stamp. Yeah, you were trying to.
Didn't ever work out, but.
But yeah, you should tell me about Lebanon. Like what did you see down there?
So Lebanon is. I love Lebanon, dude. Like I literally just like honestly,
it's the Paris of the like Beirut's supposed to be the Paris of the Middle East, right?
That's what they say, yeah. But I mean, you tell Lebanon to people now, and most people think like bombings, and which there's
that's
plenty of that too.
Kind of true, yeah.
Yeah, but Yeah, if Lebanon was more, what do I say? If Lebanon had like more economic opportunity, I would move there. But it's just kind of like, because all the Lebanese people leave too. Like there's 4 times as many Lebanese people outside of Lebanon than there is in. And it's also insane. Like for every, there's like 6 or 7 chicks for like every dude or something like that. It's ridiculous. It's just, it's a really fascinating country. Like in every socially, economically,
and
politically.
It's tiny. It's geographically tiny. Like Canada has provincial parks that are larger than Lebanon. It's crazy. They call actually. There's a lot of Lebanese people in Ottawa, Canada. There's like, they call it like New Lebanon. They have like, you can go all the shawarma shops, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Lebanese people like everywhere, but that's kind of how.
I mean, I guess out there too. Yeah, you guys have so many different cultures.
Yeah, in South American politics, there's a lot of like Lebanese people that have like ascended to like the prime minister, and like I don't know if you heard of what's his name, Carlos Slim. Yeah, he's like he's one of the wealthiest people in the world, and he's but this is also like a Lebanese joke, is that they claim everyone to be Lebanese. Like they claim Shakira's Lebanese. They claim like anyone that has like any Lebanese, they're like, you knew he was Lebanese, right?
Right, like Elizabeth Warren is First Nation, is Native American. What is it? 128.
Same deal. But no, Lebanon is super fascinating because they had the civil war from like 75 to the end date's kind of arbitrary to like 90, 92. And in the scheme of things, that's pretty recent, and that like most people remember it to some extent. You know, like even like kids or whatever, even if they don't remember it, like their parents will remember it, or so
it
it's
was
like
real for the real lived for their parents, whereas us, we don't have anything like that.
It's pretty ingrained in it. It's weird. It's like this awkward coexistence, but it works. Like Lebanon, there's so many things that you will see in Lebanon that you would not see anywhere else. Like it's not weird to see, like, to go to the beach and see someone in like a super revealing bikini next to someone who's like covered head to toe in like a burqa and like not even, like it's like anything goes. Like I mean, downtown there's like a church like a stone's throw from a mosque, and like it's weird because on one hand it's like very it's very much this kind of like, this example of coexistence and of peace, but at the other side, like there's still like, okay, this is a Muslim neighborhood, this is a Christian neighborhood, like it's weird. It's almost you could say like the US in that regard, and that the US is always like, we're this melting pot and all these cultures, but it's still very segregated kind of.
Yeah, like call yourself a melting pot at like a Texans game, like right, like
It's kind of like that, but Lebanon is even like, I think, the next step, because there's just so many things that you get there and you're like, wait, what? That's kind of the best way to like describe it.
Interesting.
Because but their education system is amazing. For one, like almost everyone is at least bilingual, and a lot of people are trilingual, because they were a French colony for a relatively short time, like 20, 25 years, but they're like still pretty proud of it.
We're one of the only cultures that, like, North America is like one of the only cultures that doesn't learn multiple languages. Yeah, it's like the entire world, they all know whatever their home country language is and English for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, then we're just like, fuck you all. We don't care.
It's like, even I always laugh when I see that like speak English, and I was like, you're not doing yourself any favors by like being like rampantly ethnocentric. Like you're honestly being kind of intellectually dishonest by just being like, it's just like lazy.
Like lazy.
Like learn English.
Lazy.
We're too lazy to learn anything else. Like, I don't know, because honestly, my whole like worldview shifted once I started learning like other languages, and that's kind of the experience that like people have. I don't know. But Lebanon is like, even take Hezbollah, for example, like the terrorist group, right? Mm-hmm. It's like everything is so nuanced there, and it's like to even like begin to understand, it's really, so Hezbollah is, I don't know if by the Canadian government, but the U.S. government considers it a terrorist organization,
I think
right?
we do.
We like to look at all these like terror groups and non-state actors as kind of a monolith. In that, like, they're all like the bad Arabs and we're just fighting them, when really like they're doing more fighting amongst themselves than
I like to I try to
Sorry,
think
go
of like I sometimes I try to think of our interaction in the Middle East like one of the tools that I found useful in assessment of political issues and debate issues generally is to like try to strongman every argument. Like in other words, like just like assume that whoever you're criticizing is at least making the best argument that they could possibly be making. Like it's easy to misinterpret people and like make them look like idiots, but it doesn't really get you anywhere, especially with them. So like, for example, like with people who are pro-intervention, the best like sort of, down to very rough vernacular is of their arguments is like, look, there's big there's medium-sized kids and little kids all in this big sandbox, and the medium-sized kids are just pounding on the little kids, and then there's like kindergartners who are just getting beat up on the wayside as a result too. So we're just like we're obviously the biggest kids on the block, well, like the U.S. is. We're just like, okay, we're gonna go in there and just like tell all the medium kids to stop and force them into a corner and just like tell them to shut the fuck up, and then so that the little kids and the kindergartners don't just get like completely destroyed because we think about the humanitarian rights of all the children, the women. Obviously, there's you can debate about the geopolitical issues, and obviously we do have it. Like there are interests over there, like you can't deny. But like, like it's so tough to find the facts. Like,
oh yeah. One thing where I was really finding that is in this like migrant caravan thing, because I was just trying to like read some sort of news, and it was just so hyper polarized that I couldn't even like find anything that would be kind of informative. It was just like, oh, all these criminals are trying to come into the U.S., or it's just like, oh, like all these children and they're being denied asylum and they're being tear gassed, and it's like what I found in most of life, the truth is somewhere like in the middle. Like,
yeah. No, dude, I don't watch the news anymore. The news is all bullshit. It's all look who owns it.
It's really disheartening because as someone who studied communications, like that's like the role of the media is really, really, really important. And it's it just sucks that it's been like so distorted and it's kind of just been made into this like hyper capitalistic entity which is like because fear sells. It's like in movies they always said growing up like. Well, like in growing up in like conservative Christendom, they'd be like, sex sells. That's why there's so much, But it's the same kind of like, it's like fear sells, sex sells, like any kind of strong motivation and ways to make more money is just the way it like, it's hard to find like, it's hard to find more like any kind of just other than going there for yourself. It's really like the only way you can figure out what's going on.
Dude, and there, like a perfect example of that, like I was, it's crazy how shifted the fucking politics are right now. Like, you look at, for example, there's actually two points I think you'll think are interesting. Like, the first one is like, so like, what do you think number? Well, if I ask the question, it's going to be obvious. But basically the number is that more people in the U.S. have died from falling out of their beds this year than people have in school and mass shootings, mass shootings.
I mean, I wouldn't doubt that that's true, but it's just
right. So like the number's like under 1,000 people. So it's like, okay, that's you guys are what 340 million people, under 400 million.
Like 320, but it's probably more.
Okay, let's say it's 300, right? Like so 1,000 people is like almost a millionth of a percent. So it's like almost no one is dying from school shootings.
Yeah.
People are dying from all other kinds of things, yet that's all you fucking hear about. It's like, obviously this is charged and it sells because it's fear-based and because it's exciting and because people will talk about it. And it's definitely a problem. Like, it's obviously a problem. We don't want people running around killing people.
Hardline debates to talk about where they just try to sell their point more. Like, it's... But no, it's an interesting. That actually reminds me, and we were speaking about Lebanon because I was talking to somebody in Lebanon about how people were like expressing all this, like, oh, Lebanon, like I'm afraid to go there, I'm afraid for you, and like I would talk to so many Lebanese people that were afraid to come to the U.S. because they were
totally. As a Muslim person, I would be fucking afraid to go to the U.S., man.
They're like, I'm afraid to come to the U.S. But even like the Christian Lebanese people, they'd be like, I'm afraid to come to the U.S. because like I might just be in a theater and people just start shooting me, or I'm like at the mall and like that doesn't happen here. Like,
but really, it's because they just see the news and they think it's all over the place.
Which is the same thing. Like your chances of probably dying in a suicide bomb in Lebanon are about the same as your chances of getting like shot in a theater here. Like really,
the Republican the Republican line on this is like that the risk of terrorists in the U.S. and it's such a scary thing. Like, dude, people are dying from fucking eating sugar and getting cancer a lot more than they're dying from terrorists, and you guys are fucking barbecuing every afternoon, man. It's like, fuck.
Another discussion about like I don't know, what I've found kind of is the more you investigate things, the more everything's just kind of screwed up because of like corporate interests and like the money and like anything, man. Like that's why I just became so like cynical and like skeptical towards the whole world, because everything's just run by money, dude. Like literally everything.
Have you read Christopher Hitchens?
No, I've heard of him, but
so in his later years he was like a really prominent, popular like atheist kind of he's probably one of the best debaters of the 20th century, but he was a really quite profound journalist for a number of like major publications in the US and spent many years traveling Middle East and South America. And I was recently reading his autobiography, and he talks about going down to South America and interviewing many of the lead revolutionaries in the Argentinian Revolution and also the Prime Minister at the same time, or around the same time. And it was he who revealed that the Argentinian government had been actually that it had been widely known amongst the like rebellion types in the Argentine that that people were just being kidnapped and they had no idea where they were going, but they were always rebels. And Christopher Hitchens got the Prime Minister to brag that they would kidnap people and fly them over the East Atlantic and just push them out of the helicopter. And they just fucking drown and sink. So I guess like I make that point just to ask you if you think that right now, as you know, like in this communications journalism space, is there a room for a reversion to basically the denial of emotions and just the seeking of only facts? In other words, like just pure old school investigative journalism where like provide the facts as best and as reputably as you can to the general public from primary sources.
Like, can we get back to that?
No, like, well, can we back? Well, of course there's some likelihood that we can, but like as a journalist, or like basically I'm making the argument that like that's what everyone wants right now, because everyone's kind of fed up with all the news unless they're pretty ideologic and they're consumed by these CNN, Fox type people.
Wants, though.
I think I think the people who are in the middle do, I guess.
I think more young people kind of want that, and I think that it might happen but another phenomenon kind of is that people are staying in the workforce a lot longer, and kind of like the people that have like the grips on power, consolidation on power, are like, I don't know enough about this to really say this with any authority, but I would assume that like if you look at now of like the ages of people that are like running corporations versus like 50 years ago, I bet it's like considerably older. And so I think that
but we're also living longer.
Yeah.
And it's if you're if you have the means, it's easy. It's you're driven to live longer, so it kind of makes sense in that sense too. But I mean, it's definitely true that people. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. those are just possible explanations of that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that because of that, you have largely like I think even the fact or like the way that, we're super like divided and that people believe this. I think that the average person doesn't even feel that way, but they just believe it. And I wouldn't say that that's totally due to the age demographic, but like I had a Lyft driver the other day and he was like, oh, my 9-year-old dad just sits at home and watches Fox News all day, right? But like really the market for those kind of things is like much older, and not even just Fox News, I feel like, but like what millennial sits down and like watches TV? You know, like you're going to watch Netflix, or you're going to watch like, you know, like TV in of itself is dying. Like I live in LA and I see all these like billboards for like ABC, like, you know, traditional sitcoms, but nobody watches those anymore unless you're like over 40, I feel like.
Oh yeah, dude. I don't even. Yeah, I get my news like maybe from YouTube, like mostly from podcasts.
Yeah. So it's just even like the way that people are getting information. It's just I feel like
and that's going to affect
so quickly now that people can't even keep up with it anymore. It's just weird.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. I remember having a conversation with my ex and her family on a road trip once, a couple years back, and this was about 6 months to a year before Trump's election, and we were talking about the ferocity of the debate and of the political atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that led into this conversation of like, well, there's so many things happening at once. Like, how are we supposed to know the facts on every issue and even be like informed? Like, to be an informed voter is really difficult. Like, I made in the Canadian election before that, I was making the argument to people like, what facts do you actually know about this issue and this issue and this issue and this issue? Like, because I don't know any of the facts on the issue.
Yeah.
But you seem to think that you're going to vote. Like, why are you going to vote? Like, well, I think I'm more conservative. Like, okay, but that's just like a stupid argument not based on any facts. Like, and like in the midterms here, you see all this promotion, like, oh, go vote, go vote, go vote. And like, you should vote if you think you're informed and you've thought out and you believe that you know what you're doing. But at the same time, like, a little bit of humility and recognition that you actually may not know what you think, and your best representation might be just a neutral position.
Yeah. That like kind of brings forth like an interesting point, is that in the age of like so much like information is so much more easily accessed, and like you can Google things, and I think people think they not know a lot more than they do, just like generally. I think the average person thinks they're much more informed than they are.
Oh, we're cocky motherfuckers.
It's due to that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like this phenomenon that, we have all this information so accessible. Like, I know that. But it's like, when's the last time, you ask the average person, like, when's the last time they read a book?
Right.
It's just, it's scary, dude, because people don't do that kind of thing anymore, because they're just constantly, like, fed so many things that it's like, I mean, even, I guess people, like, before long, like, people won't need to read books because there's like documentaries about everything. But like,
I still read books, but yeah.
No, I read books, but even like, I don't read as much as I'd like to. No. One just because I have time, and like one's just because I have other. I don't know. That's not really the point. It's just like what people actually give earnest seeking for knowledge. Like so few people.
Well, and like as someone, you've done a master's degree, like as an academic, if you're going to write a paper in academia, and if you're going to say that you have a unbiased opinion on an issue, and if you're going to make the claim that you have really looked at all the evidence, what you need to do is a literature review. You need to review all the information out there, and you need to sort that information by its likelihood to be true, in other words, its veracity, and its impact on whatever situation you're exploring. And it's like, okay, so you're saying you've done that on Americans' economics, on the on all the rights issues, all the social issues. Like, no one is doing this. So it's like, yeah, it's just like we're all shooting from the hip, and
it's like the blind leading the blind. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, but one thing I think is interesting too is that like you ask people what the world's issues are, and obviously like what they think as far as like their partisan lines will be very different. But one thing I used to always say, like you ask people about the Middle East, and people are like, oh yeah, Middle East, like they got big like terrorism problems, they got big like mostly terrorism, right? But if you actually think of like the biggest problems in the Middle East is like and something that nobody talks about and seemingly nobody cares about is like slavery is basically still happening.
No.
Like
what?
They have
where?
Yeah, essentially. So I wrote actually a huge paper about this. This was like probably like the main paper I've ever wrote, like ever. I'm still looking for a place to publish it.
I was gonna say, if it's published, you should send it to me.
I'd like to publish it.
I'll link it in the description, dude. I'll link in the.
Before I can, this is a little, I guess, a little set of that, because essentially what I was trying to do was in my grad program we had to take some law classes.
Oh, cool.
And like in the law school, and I took a few, and I was like, well, I actually really like this. And then I was like, dude, you don't want to go to law school. Like that's 3 more years of school, like more debt, like it's not worth it.
It's a lot of work.
And what I was fascinated by was like human rights law, international law, which really aren't even a thing. Right? Like, international law is only enforceable insofar as countries, like, agree to let it be enforced. So it's very, like, it lives in this kind of gray space of, like, yeah...
True, it's subject to your adherence to the UN, right?
It's a lot, and a lot of people... I mean, even the U.S. is, like, there's people that legitimately want the U.S. out of the UN. And
so, UN.
Like... Yeah, so I mean, international law is a lot more of a gray area. Like, I mean, even to practice, you have to be barred in a certain state. You can't even go to a different state. So imagine trying to like be an international lawyer. Like, you're almost just. I came to the conclusion that you're almost better off just being informed in those topics, and you can still work in those topics. Like, you can work for Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch or whatever, and you don't need to be an international lawyer, right? But essentially, I took international law, I took immigration law, and I took Middle Eastern law, which was super fascinating because Middle Eastern law was taught by an Israeli dude who actually, I disagree with him on a lot of things, but I really like the guy and I really respect him. And
it must be difficult as an Israeli to accurately, or at least unbiased, in an unbiased manner, portray, the Islamic law without getting...
well, he did. It's kind of interesting because I think he's almost more he's an interesting dude. He's written a lot of books. Like, you go read his stuff. His name's Amos Guerra. And
how do you spell Guerra? Like
Guerra? It's Guiora.
Guiora.
Yeah, and his first name is Amos. And I mean, I tell him to his face, like, I disagree with a lot of what he says, but he's a really smart guy, and I respect him a lot.
Lawyers will respect you more if you actually tell them you disagree with them.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think he actually came under some criticism from, and hopefully he doesn't watch this because he'll be like, "What? You don't know what you're talking about." But
yeah, we definitely don't. Yeah.
But he, I've heard just like in whisperings that he was kind of criticized in the law school department because he was almost more like took a more philosophical approach to law than actual just like the law. Which to me is more interesting because the law is only applicable insofar as like people actually believe it, or like just anybody can just read textbooks, and because really the whole thing of law school is just like interpreting the law and how to make it like work to your advantage. And I don't know, but I'm not a lawyer,
it's only as good as its philosophy combined by the effort of its perpetrators. Yeah.
So we basically just had a bunch of readings that we need to do for that class, and then we just have discussions. And what was funny is he almost used me as like, well, I don't know, Chandler, you know the Middle East, you talk. And I was like, dude, I just lived there. Like, I'm not qualified to like be an expert or something just because I lived there. But
you're the closest thing to that in the class, I guess.
Yes. It was interesting because he even asked me something. He's like, I don't know. He's like, tell me what this means in Arabic. I was like, dude, I don't speak Arabic. Like, but it was interesting. But basically, I wrote in that class because most of the papers were on things like the enforceability of like secular law versus Sharia law, right? Or like which even Sharia law, like people have such a like backwards interpretation of what that means. Sharia law is more like it's almost just like, I don't know, think about like the Ten Commandments, or like it's just a more religious interpretation of the law. It's not like everyone trying to.
But if you're in a caliphate state, it is the same thing as what would be secular law in a non-caliphate, right?
But define like what's a caliphate state? Like, are we talking like Saudi Arabia?
I guess my interpretation of caliphate state would be one where the highest level of lawmaking of how would you call it? Defers to a Quran and its ancillary texts interpretations, right?
There's so few countries that actually. I mean, there's a lot of countries that call
there's definitely
themselves Islamic republics,
right.
But like the ones that are, and I mean, and the closest one that is like Islamic, and even what it means to be Islamic is like, what does it mean to be Christian, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So many, yeah, it's so nuanced. But you think like Saudi Arabia, for example, and like, I mean, that's even going somewhere else, but I guess they would be Islamic law in that they still practice like some things that would be like very Old Testament, right? Like cutting off somebody's hand if they're caught stealing, or like, like those kind of things. And maybe in that sense, but it's just law based off of different, like, I mean, a lot of like have law, like French law is like a classic, like things are based off of French law, for example. Right. But, and I'm worried I'm coming across as like super unsophisticated because I'm really simplifying all these like grandiose ideas. But
I mean, but that's the only way to talk about it in a brief format without getting
like a
into
real way,
without being a true scholar,
Yeah. And also, like, once you leave academia, you're kind of just like, really, I can be like a real person again, because it's just so theoretical and so. Yeah. But anyways, most of the papers in that class were like kind of like, how do you enforce like Sharia law versus secular law, or like those kind of paradigms. And I think I kind of shifted this paradigm because I actually wrote something on what I was like, this is a real issue in the Middle East, like not what we think is an issue in the Middle East. And I wrote about the rights of foreign workers. Because it's very like, it's like Jim Crow laws type stuff, like worse even. You go over there, so I know Lebanon like relatively well because I live there.
Can we back up just so I understand fully?
Okay.
I think I missed something. Okay, so you wrote this article on the rights of foreign workers, but it's the rights of foreign workers working in Lebanon, or it's American perspectives on the rights of
paradigm. I did, I think I did, and again I have to go. I did the UAE, I did Qatar, I did Israel, just to kind of mix it up, and I also did Lebanon. I believe I did 4 countries, and just to kind of like
UAE, Qatar, Lebanon,
and Israel.
Interesting. And so you're looking at the variance, I guess, in their perspectives on foreign workers.
Kind of, yeah. And even I talked about Sharia law and I talked about, I guess, the religious precedent for. I was kind of advocating for a more humane treatment of foreign workers through like a legal paradigm, I guess, like a legal framework, I guess you could say, that they're supposedly afforded these protections as per either the Constitution.
In their own constitutions?
Yeah. And that what's actually funny is a lot of Middle Eastern countries, like their constitutions look a lot like the U.S. Constitution because we did so much regime change that we basically wrote their constitution.
Well, right, like how can you look at the U.S. Constitution and be like, no, completely wrong? Yeah. Like, no, it's actually pretty damn good. It deserves improvement, but it's probably the best thing.
Well, it's open to interpretation, like anything else. But
that's true too.
Yeah. But so basically, like, as per your own legal paradigms, you should be treating these people better, is essentially what I was saying. And I went through like their constitutions, and then I went through even like, so if it was an Islamic paradigm, like, even like Quranic arguments and Sharia arguments for like, treating foreigners better and whatever. And basically what happened was that when like the Arab world started to really grow, I guess it was when they had the pearling industry in like the Gulf, and they would bring in all these foreign workers, and they had this...
Which is when, like the 50s, the 40s?
Even soon. Dude, I don't even remember my own paper. I gotta go back and read it.
It happens, man.
But I think it was like early 1900s, like early 1900s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think, I'd have to double check. But basically, there's this concept in like both like Arab culture, and I think even in the Quran, that like basically if you have like foreigners living among you, like you treat them like your own family and you take care of them. And somehow this got distorted into kind of like, I can treat them like my own family, I can screw them over type thing. And
totally makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. And so they like, I guess they would just like let them live on their boat and stuff, but they wouldn't pay them. Or like,
so
I don't
they
know.
transitioned from like,
yeah.
Like they went from like the Bedouin philosophy to like, the Islamic State, like ISIS.
I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I'm like misquoting my own paper, which is sad. But essentially, and then they had, and there was a lot of and as they were like, because the like economic development in these, like, especially the Gulf states like Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, was just like if you look at Dubai in 1990, it was like nothing. It was like one building.
Right.
And then just overnight they had to like build one of the biggest cities in the world, one of the most advanced cities in the world, like out of nothing.
Yeah. And
so they had more demand for workforce than they even could meet. Like they just didn't. And so they brought in a lot of people from Africa, from Southeast Asia, and it led to this kind of like racialization of the workforce. Like these type of people do these type of jobs, right? And you also think about like in I can use like Kuwait or UAE as an example. You have all these like basically just super privileged people whose like parents are like sheikhs, or they're like whatever. They're not going to go build a tower, right? Like it's almost you could almost say it's like an extreme example of like people that want to kick like low skilled immigrants out, and it's like, well, are you going to go pick the fruit and the, you know what I mean, like that kind of thing.
America has the same arguments, right?
Yeah, to the nth degree, because I mean, like building the towers and stuff, like the Burj Khalifa and different things. I mean, and this is again like an oversimplification, but so basically it led to this like racialization of certain like work. Like, okay, these races do these kind of work. And in Lebanon, it's even so bad that like you get paid based on where you're from, and it's like this in Dubai too. So like you or I can go to Dubai
what evidence, just like to push you a little bit, what evidence can you like what have you seen, I guess?
Oh, that's well documented. It's like you can even just like Google it. You can be as scholarly as you want, or you can be as like, but you can just Google it. And there's
wow, that's so crazy, dude. Wow.
Yeah. And people don't ever, like, nobody talks about this. Everybody's like, oh yeah, there's all these terrorists there, and it's like, well,
so it's literally racistly based. Yeah.
It's you go there and you like I was like, this still exists, like, you kind of think that like it's done away with, right? But so in Lebanon, it's basically, and again, I know the most about Lebanon because I saw it. It's like most people, it's very, very, very common to have like a nanny to help out with your kids, which in and of itself is fine, right? And there's even people like one of my really good friends. She lives in BC now, but she's like she and her like family and her kids, like they had like some help from Nepal. And they like paid her well, and she was able to like build 2 houses for her family in Nepal. So like, there's nothing wrong with like having to live in nanny, like in and of itself, it's fine. Yeah. But the way that they do it, and like, it's very much like not even inhumane, like subhuman treatment. I feel like you could like see like pets being treated better, maybe. So it's and people are just now starting to talk about this. They even formed, and they formed. Like Lebanese housewives formed this like nonprofit. It was such a shame. It was such a joke. They formed a nonprofit for like people to stop speaking bad about Lebanese housewives who were abusing their servants, basically. And I was like, dude, this is the most like pseudo
human rights
I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So, but basically what happens is
it's the high income housewives who are being perpetrated against.
Yeah, they're like, look at how they're making us seem like we're great people.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, this is kind of a phenomenon that's, and I think it's somewhat recent, like along the course of history, and in that there's mass migration to fill in the jobs from poorer countries that the people in those countries don't want to do. But there, it's over the top. Like, I work in an organization that works in Afghanistan, and in Iran, the Afghans are essentially like, they're the people that are doing like the construction, like the low skilled labor that people don't want to do. Most countries that are like even somewhat, Iran's not like some economic powerhouse, but it's more affluent than Afghanistan. So, so it's like every country has theirs, like kind of their, but this is super pronounced and super out there. So you or I could go to Dubai, for example, and we could, let's say we're engineers and we go to Dubai, right? And we work as an engineer. We'll get paid great in Dubai. You or I would make a lot of money. But if somebody from India comes and the exact same job, they'll get paid probably 4 times less. The exact same job, exact same skill set, exact same background. And it's like, and actually half of Dubai is Indian. like half of the population of Dubai is from India. Only 1/8 of the population from the UAE is actually Emirati.
I was gonna ask, like, what is Dubai's what is Dubai's economy based on? I always just perceived it to be based on like rich people who want to create the new metropolis, and so they're spending a bunch of money.
I mean, that's a lot of it, but I'm actually really curious what's going to happen to them if people start to go off oil. Because, I mean, Saudi Arabia, all of the Gulf countries are like based off oil. And so
Qatar.
If we start going to more like renewable energy sources, I mean, I think they can do natural gas there too.
Dude,
but,
British Columbia,
they're screwed, dude. Their economy will essentially collapse.
British Columbia just made a resolution that all new cars need to be electric by I want to say it's 2040.
By 2040, they need to have all the cars electric.
All the cars, like, I think renewable energy based is the line. But I mean, yeah. Let's see, BC cars renewable, something like that. It's gonna come up, right? If my Google search doesn't.
I mean, if the world's still around in 2040, right?
Yeah. Get Trump away from that. Yeah, zero emission. Sorry, zero emission is the way they say it. But that's a pretty audacious goal. But honestly, that's like directly in line with what the leading people in the EV industry think is like achievable. But I think it's audacious for sure. Like really, like, you're not gonna let us buy a fucking Hummer. Like, you're not gonna let us buy a like Jeep Wrangler. You're not gonna let us buy.
So you can't even like buy old cars anymore. Like, you can't drive.
No. New cars. All new cars sold in BC
but from
must
2040
be.
on, that seems like, I don't know. That seems pretty reasonable to me.
So, dude, like transport trucks.
Oh, like nothing. But they can. I mean,
cars and trucks sold in BC will be 2040 by zero emission. Oh, light duty cars and trucks. Okay, so. Not heavy duty, but still.
In Barcelona, the mayor made a resolution where you can't drive in the city. You can't drive cars that are, what is it? Is it 15? I don't know. Like, basically, car has to be 2000 or newer or something, just for like emissions. It's I don't know, and that's by like 2020. Like, that's pretty soon. So I don't know. There's something
crazy.
But anyways,
it seems a little idealistic to me. I think it'll get bumped forward. But
I mean. But so essentially what happens in Lebanon is, like, if you get somebody to raise your kids and they're from the Philippines, for example, they'll pay you maybe reasonably well by their standards, like maybe $500 to $700 a month, which is nothing, but like that's decent salary.
Well,
like,
shit's cheaper there too. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, and if you're from like Ethiopia, you'll make like $200 a month or something. But it's not enough. Like, basically their promise, like, okay, you're gonna go to Lebanon, you're gonna go work there. You know, it's good economic conditions. You can make money. You can send it back home. And what happens is they get there and they like confiscate their passports, and they're essentially slaves because like they have no course for like they have no legal means or like means for mediation or like because they get their passports stolen. They're forced to work and like maybe they get paid, maybe they don't.
Why do they get their passports stolen?
They don't get their passports stolen. They get their passports taken by like the agency that they go sponsored through, and so they can't leave because they don't have their passports.
Or just
no, they're basically completely 100% at the mercy of how good their employer is, which is basically like how slaves were. Like you're 100% at the mercy of how good your master was.
So
it's literally
this is the slavery you're talking about in the Middle East.
It's basically slave and also, and it's super, like, Al Jazeera did stuff on it about, like, the people that built the stadiums for the World Cup in Qatar. Like, they were all from Southeast Asia, and they all had to work for, like, really low wages and really long hours.
Yeah, I heard about all this, yeah.
Yeah. So that was basically what my paper was on, and I actually put it on my to-do list to go republish it. But
you definitely should, man. It's an interesting... It's an interesting thing to think about. I think people will dig into it. Like, that's it's crazy. I mean, obviously, you know, what pressure can we put on them? But even if it gets popular, maybe they'll start to rethink it. You know,
It's
So
just
I think
things
it's
that you don't
important.
think happen anymore. So
Right.
that's one thing I talk about when I talk about the Middle East is like, yeah, you think terrorism is, it's not even their main problem. Like there's a famine in Yemen, like a mass famine that our government's supporting, basically by funding the Saudis to bomb the Houthi rebels. And it's like,
Well,
so,
yeah, and we're selling guns to ISIS, and we're fucking
yeah,
through the
it's
Saudi
just,
Arabians,
the
right?
problems in the Middle East are not even, I don't know.
It's a massively insoluble problem. Like it's so difficult. Yeah. What do you how do you define? Well, we were talking before about like so North Americans we like to say like it's really easy to say like to criticize, for example, like the Quran, right? It's really easy to say like, oh, you know, the Quran tells you to, you know, kill the infidel and all these things, but like the Bible, the Quran has passages that are less than good. You know, it's you could criticize a Christian by saying, oh, the Bible says that you should what is it like a man should be stoned if he lays with another man in the way a man lays with a woman.
Yeah, I think that's like Leviticus or something.
Yeah, that's Leviticus 19:32 or something. But something like that, 18. But like, yeah, so like it's really easy to pull off like textual information and then criticize the entire religion.
Mm-hmm.
And then so people ask, what's a Muslim, or how do you define these tiers of Muslims? And obviously there's, you know, just generic Muslims who are, you know, not at all, you know, Quran thumpers, I guess, to use the analogy. But like, and then you have sort of these what would you call them? Like, there's Islamists, right, which are these people who are they're dedicated Muslims. They're probably opposed to violence, but they're still interested in bringing the Islam to the entire world in the same way that an evangelical Christian or a you know, a Christian who's
more fundamentalist, maybe.
Well, like an evangelical Christian still is supposed to anyway have the goal to bring the gospel to the entire world, but an Islamist might be more, I always
heard the term Islamist used in like a militant
I think
context.
that's like Islamic extremist or like.
Okay.
At least that's how I understand it, but yeah, I could be wrong too. But yeah, like how do you weight those in terms of the like the populations of each of those groups?
So what I've always found kind of interesting, this is maybe anecdotal, and then I'll get to your question, is that the people that hate each other the most, seemingly, probably have the most in common.
That's like, awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Like take like
in a lot of cases. Yeah.
And then someone from like the Southern Baptist, like super Republican, super like America, super like, it's like, we're better than you. Our God is the true God. Like everyone else is wrong. Like it's basically just two different versions of the same philosophy. Like you take like like being super stereotypical, right? But you take like an Alabama redneck who like loves Trump, like loves the Bible, loves Jesus, loves the church. You know what I mean? Like, just if you're really stereotypical about it, and them and someone like an ISIS have essentially the same philosophy, just different means to the end. You know, like
minus the militantism, I guess. But yeah.
Well, but really, if you ask somebody who's like really hardline, really fundamentalist Christian, and you ask them, okay, if you gave them a hypothetical scenario, say if I kill these two people that are Christians in front of me, and in doing so convert these other two people, would you kill them? They would.
But that's not the same as strapping a bomb to your chest and walking through a kindergarten classroom.
Ideologically, it's the same.
With less dedication, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's all.
But
it's
another thing that's interesting too is a lot of these Islamist groups that are like hyper Muslim, apparently, like ISIS, for example. ISIS is using a lot of things that are that are like anti-Islamic. Like there's a lot of reports from the camps that they're like, doing drugs or like having prostitutes or a lot of things that are explicitly forbidden in the Quran. And these are like the people that want to live in this Islamic caliphate, but they're blatantly disregarding what their religion says.
Yes.
And this is widespread among the people that are like, religious fundamentalists, militant people.
Yes, they're taking their pleasures before they're due. They're coming early on those virgins rather than waiting their turn.
So it's all, even that, like, what was the original question? Because I kind of got off on a tangent. Was it, what do I think the population of people are? Like, how many of these kind of Muslims is for
what percentage of Muslims want to kill all infidels, and what percentage of Muslims want to bring Islam to the rest of the world, and what percent of Muslims just want to live as a Muslim and don't really care?
So I would say that the percentage of Muslims that want to kill all infidels is very minute, like very minuscule. What I would say, though, that might alarm some people, is that the amount of Islamic people that would like to maybe impose Islamic ideals on others is probably uncomfortably high.
I think it's 30%-ish.
But I think it's worth dichotomizing those two ideas.
Oh yeah,
because
totally different things. Yeah,
because they get kind of lumped together.
They do. Yeah.
And
Islamist, right?
How many people say that America's a Christian nation, or that like they want the Ten Commandments in the courthouse, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, which
again, it's really the same thing.
Yeah, totally.
And if you look, the Bible and the Quran are really not that different.
The Quran is influenced by the Bible, by the Old Testament in its ancestry. I mean, it's a derivation of it in the same way the New Testament is.
Yeah, a lot of the same stories, a lot of the same principles. There was these like more liberal Muslims that did this thing on Netflix. I think there were also comedians called like Meet the Muslims. And they basically just went and said how they were like just like regular people, but they were like even hyper liberal, like almost like they would go and like the women would tell like crass jokes. And it was interesting, some of the more like devout Muslims would walk out because they were like, oh sweet, we get to celebrate being Muslim. And they're yeah. But one thing that they did that was really interesting is they went on like the street and they played this game with like people that walked by and were like, okay, well, you're gonna ask us if this is from, I think it was like the Bible, the Quran, and then they had like a wild card in there, like a Frank Sinatra lyric or something. I don't know. Just they had like something that was totally, and almost everyone got it wrong. And like, they very sensationalized it. Like they purposely picked out like these kind of verses you said from the Bible, right? About how like stone the gays, kill everybody kind of things. Yeah. And then they also would pick out things from the Quran that are like very insightful, like, the greatest thing is love, or if you have it, like things that people are like, oh, that's nice.
Invite the stranger into your home. Yeah, these sorts of
They got those kind of things. Everybody like, because the average person is, like you said, not informed. But I think another thing, too, is that people in a lot of these, like, either like a Muslim country in that it's like the Islamic Republic of blah, 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 or it's like a Muslim majority country, there's a very big variance between what that means. Like living in Indonesia, for example, and living in Saudi Arabia is like nothing alike. But even more so than that, people forget about countries like Central Asia, like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. Like most people don't even know those are places. I feel.
But like they're black boxes to me. They just they don't trade with anyone. They're not in the news. They're just kind of funny names, and that's about it.
But I had a friend that traveled like somewhat extensively throughout there, and he told me that they have a view towards Islam like Europe does of Christianity. Like they have the mosques and they have like but everyone alcohol is readily available, and like it's almost like we have these nice cathedrals and we were all Catholic, but now we're all pretty secular, And there's kind of this, like in Lebanon, for example, people have their religion on their ID card. Like I'm so and so, I'm a Muslim. I'm so and so, I'm a Christian, which is crazy, right?
Yeah,
but
Americans don't want their gender on their ID card now.
Yeah. But like. So you can ask somebody, like, what's your religion? Oh, I'm Muslim. Oh, okay, cool. People will be like, I'm Muslim, I'm an atheist. Like, that's the thing. Because it's just like, oh, my family's, I'm in an Islamic family,
it's
so I'm
to
Muslim.
Be Jewish.
But,
it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same kind of idea. So in a lot of these contexts, your religion has a lot more to do with your identity than
culture.
Actually what you believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that, I don't know, and I'm not the most qualified person to talk on this. I've just traveled in these countries, and but one thing that I think is really interesting too is a lot of the things that people attribute to the Middle East, or like attribute as being like very like forbidden in the Middle East, is totally, and again, talking about Islam and talking about Arabs and talking about the Middle East, you and I all know that these are like different things, but the average person, or not the average person even, I guess you could say the unsophisticated thinker like lumps these all together.
Many
right?
people, yeah. If you haven't thought about
They're
it before,
like Arab, Muslim, same thing, right? Not at all. But a lot of the things like sexuality, or like, you know, think about like belly dancing, for example. Like that's a very sexualized, like that came from the Middle East. And you go to like Middle Eastern weddings, they'll have belly dances at their weddings, and they'll have like, and even like you think of like Kama Sutra, like that's from India, but like there's a lot of like trading from that, you know, like that region of the world. Kind of when America was all like prude and Puritan and whatnot, that was like America was like the Middle East of them, and then they like things just kind of go in cycles, right? But like, and another thing that's very prominent in Middle Eastern culture, and this is why I think it like kind of not just American, but even North American, but even like so, it's a hyper American ideal to kind of like be who you are, be a straight shooter, like, you know what I mean, like honesty, integrity, these kind of things. In the Middle East, like what you do in the privacy of your own home and what you do like on the street or how you present yourself is like I think the Prophet Muhammad said something about how like if somebody is looking through the peephole on your door, gouge his eye out or something. Like just by like he didn't mean that literally. It's like how what did Jesus said? It's better to like if your right arm causes you to sin, cut it off or something like that, right? It's kind of the same kind of like same kind of idea. But what that basically means
it's hyperbole, right?
Yeah. What you do in your own home is your business, kind of. But like which is so contrary to American like ideals, right? Because
and
America's like, be who you are and flaunt. But the like Middle Eastern culture is very much like, hey, do whatever you want, just don't do it in front of me, right? Like it's even like. I feel like people feel that way about like homosexuality or like these more like, hey, if you want to do that, like that's fine, just don't do it around me.
Do you think the Islamic State type countries would think that, or do you think that's more just like the average Muslim?
I think the average person would just think that.
Yeah, okay.
But even I wouldn't. There's like varying attitudes
so
towards it. But that's one like cultural difference that is huge. In that like even. I think an Islamic person, like even like a rather devout, like let's say an average, like, you know, you compare somebody that goes to church and they might go to their prayer meeting, like they're relatively devout, right? They might just be like, oh yeah, if you want to drink, just don't flaunt it, and to go do it in your house or go, you know what I mean? Like it's very
live and let live, but don't breathe your smoke on me, right?
Don't blow it. Don't rub it in my face. And America is very much a rub it in my face type place. You know what I mean? Like people wear T-shirts saying like "Make America Great Again" or you know what I mean? Like I am who I am. Yeah, like this is.
Yeah, in the public place, in the public. Yeah, it's interesting how adverse Americans are to just that, like people expressing their beliefs. It's kind of interesting, like it's kind of a double entendre, because like it's possible in a way to, or not a double entendre, it's a catch-22, because like you want people to have the liberty in public space to be who they are, because if you can't be who you are, you can't express your ideas, and if you can't express your ideas, the world can't change as a result of your ideas, and if the world can't change as a result of ideas, you're a useless human being. But at the same time, it's very easy to offend people, and so it's very easy for your expression of your own ideas to kick back against you, and you get this effect where people double down on their beliefs, whereas if you had expressed it in a more, I guess, palatable way, people being more open to it. So yeah, like it's so weird how like the gay rights march, for example, it was like back in the day, like used to piss so many people off, because like go fuck people in the ass, like why can't I have a straight rights march, right? And it's like go fuck people in the ass in your own home if you want to, but don't don't stop my street because you want to do that. But at the same time, like, the gay rights community was seriously oppressed. And so they're making a statement saying, hey, like, this is a problem and you need to be on our side, and then we'll stop marching. Like, we don't need to march. Like, right? Like, the goal eventually is to have no more gay rights marches, and for homosexuals just to feel part of society with
they don't need them. Yeah.
But they don't need them, right? Now, of course, yeah, like, if you're going to be quoted, you're going to be quoted as just saying, like, you know, there should be no more gay rights marches or something. But but like,
if you were running for office, that would be what came out.
Right. 30 years from now, yeah. But like, these are the sort of like conflicting problems of communication that we have, where it's like, we're not even talking about the same thing, but the way I'm expressing what I'm saying is offending someone on this side, and they can't get past how offended they are to try to see what I'm saying in order to even assess if they should be okay with being offended, because what I'm expressing might be more important than my personal offense in the action.
So, like, civility is kind of being lost,
right?
And then not beyond that, it's like the competence to like have a discussion, but even beyond that, I think that it's like more harmful because it's not addressing any root problems. Yeah. So like, take racism for example. Like, racism is a problem. That's a problem, right? I think that only the like naivest among us would be like, nope, racism doesn't exist anymore. Like, you know. Yeah. But I think, like, so for example, like, the fact that people don't call people the N-word anymore, that's great. That's progress. That's a good thing.
Sure.
But like if you're talking and it's like, well, you said like a black person, what do you mean a black person? Or like, what do you mean a white? And it's just like, because then you get to this point where it's just like, okay, I can't say these certain words.
Like the fact that you had to say N-word instead of nigger. Like,
well,
it's a word.
I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that myself.
But like you're saying it in reference to the word itself. So when you say the term N-word, nigger comes in my head. So whether or not you say N-word or nigger, like, I'm still thinking the word. So it's like, you're so communicating. But the fact that you can't say it is, the fact that you won't say it is good. But the fact that you will be like criticized if you do,
it's like I'm not
going to
say, like, it's like saying, to me, it's just, I don't know. I don't see. Because I think it would offend, like, that, to me, that makes sense why that would offend somebody. Like, right?
Oh, yeah. No, totally. Yeah.
So to me, I'm not gonna say it, you know? But, like, that's my own. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like if you think back, even, like, when high school, it's like, we're not that old, right? It's not that long ago. Right. But, like, when I was in high school, people would always say, oh, that's so gay, or, like, stop being gay, dude. You know what I mean? Like, that was common vernacular. Yeah. And so, like, the fact that people don't say that anymore, it's like, yeah, I can say that. I can say that's so gay, and I don't have anything against gay people. But it's just like, it's an unsophisticated way to speak. It's even like, oh, you're calling somebody a retard, right? You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's progress. The fact that we don't call people retards anymore, that we don't use the N-word, or that we don't say that's so gay, like, that's progress, because speech matters. And but that's where the dichotomy is that speech matters. But at the same time, like, if you're just so careful that you don't say certain things, you're really not addressing any of the problems. Like, somebody can have the most racist viewpoints ever.
Right. Well,
and they know what rhetoric to use so that they come across correct, right?
That's Barack Obama. That's Barack Obama to me. Like, Barack Obama is the king of saying nothing at all, but at the same time saying, oh, it's an easy solution, and we're all going to be great. Like,
yeah, Obama. I guess it's a good example because Obama's super intelligent, right? And that's the difference between, well, that's one difference between Obama and Trump, and another difference is that Obama, like, he was like one of the greatest orators, like, of our time, right? Like, Obama could give a speech and you're just like, wow,
most prolific,
like, super prolific, super intelligent, super well spoken. But, like, people don't realize Obama deported more immigrants than I think anybody before him.
And Donald Trump's policies against Obama, like, what you would call, like, Obama had a worse Muslim ban than Trump did. Like in effect, essentially. Like, it's just way worse. And also killed way more children by bombs.
The thing about Obama that, like, really is people always talk, and, like, domestically, like, Obama did a lot of good things domestically. But like, and
social stuff,
social things, But like, if you're talking about like Obama's foreign policy was horrendous, and also like Obama did a lot of things, he just didn't tell people about it. You know, he didn't shove it in people's face like Trump did, so people were like, "Oh yeah, I support Obama," and I just
because he's a nice guy.
It's really, and that takes me to me, one of the biggest problems with American politics is the fact that we only have two parties.
Oh man,
basically,
you're so fucked.
Sophisticated country,
dude. The fact that you have parties, the fact that you have a representative government makes, like, I don't understand representative government anymore. Like, why do we have representative government? Why do I need someone to represent me? It's literally a mouse click, and I can say what I want the country to do. Like,
yeah. I mean, I guess I kind of are your political views maybe more like libertarian per se, or?
I'd say I'm like classical liberal, just like very socially liberal, probably economically conservative. But I think libertarianism is like makes no sense. Basically, libertarianism is a government where we don't want a government.
I think,
and that's just like that's probably a mischaracterization, but that's how I see it.
I get to the point of the people that you hate the most are the most like you. That's almost like because like libertarians to me are like extreme right wings, right? And they're like, oh, the left, we hate the left, right? But really, like, they're kind of anarchists, which is
they're center of right. They're definitely center of right. Like they're rights oriented for sure.
Yeah, but like so basically, libertarianism in theory is great, just like communism in theory is great.
Yeah, but I'm not a libertarian.
No, but I kind of. It's almost like I view the government as like almost a necessary evil. Like you have to have.
No, of course. Yeah. No, it's
interesting to me because it's like, in theory, like individuals could do things better on their own. But one thing that I actually, and I'm kind of having this inward debate with myself, is as someone who works in international development, and this has been somewhat recent, and this is actually a great documentary to watch. It's called Poverty Inc. It's on Netflix, and it's basically talking about how the aid organizations have created their own economy based off aid, where they're basically just profiting off of poverty.
Right, you can have a whole career profiting off of poverty, right?
Yeah,
you can have a multi-million-dollar mansion profiting off of poverty.
I mean, because basically what they're doing is just providing aid and not providing solutions. Like Haiti's a great example. I'm actually reading this book called Travesty in Haiti, which was recommended on the documentary. But it's just like, it talks about how in the 90s the Clintons basically ruined the Haitian economy by like sending so much rice that the farmers in rural areas were like all put out of business. So then they all moved to the city. And then when the earthquake hit, the devastation was so much worse because there had been mass urbanization. And like, it's just basically, like the more you look into it, the more the U.S. has like screwed the whole world over. But then again, that goes back.
We've also done a lot of good. Yeah.
It's like, it's a cycle because basically if the U.S. is like, hey, you know what, like we're not gonna, and I'm a self-proclaimed pacifist. Like I don't believe in war. I don't think there's really a point. But at the same time, I am cognizant of the fact that let's say the U.S. is just like, yeah, you know what, like we're gonna mind our own business. We're not gonna. Then China's just gonna do it, or Russia might do it, or you know what I mean. Like there's a power vacuum. Throughout the course of history, there's always been a power that's kind of imposing themselves on people. Well, and who's to say who would be more benevolent, you know?
Well, and the other side of it too is like you have to help people. Like if if Hezbollah is intent on, I do not take a stance first of all on the Israel problem, but like if Hezbollah is intent on just bombing Jerusalem, like just to kill civilians, it doesn't matter. Like I am in favor of defending like Israeli citizens. But at the same time, it's like there are going to be negative effects, and you need to spend considerable effort minimizing those. But these are all if you were going to take like a very engineering approach and you wanted to engineer the best methodology to intervene, but also minimize your effects on good people. This takes hundreds of years to design, but we just don't have that time. So like we're shooting from the hip, even in international policy. It's like we're fundamentally computationally limited in like a
Well, beyond that, I think too, in almost every situation, there's a stated humanitarian interventionist agenda, and then there's what we're really trying to do. And I don't think they're always at odds, but
Yeah.
there's always like double sides that is not being communicated to the general public.
Right. Like Hillary, approving all these like extended sales of guns to the Saudi Arabia is like the perfect example to me, because it's like, okay, we're trying to do all this good in the Middle East, but at the same time we're just profiteering and
We
causing
profit from an
ISIS.
unstable Middle East.
Yeah, and causing ISIS to get all the weavenry. It's like,
Yep. I mean, the people that are
stop.
lobbying, like the weapons corporations that like are lobbying, and actually, have you heard of Jeremy Scahill?
Oh, the name. I don't know who he is.
He's like my hero, dude. He has this movie called it's a documentary called Dirty Wars, also on Netflix, and he basically just goes to Afghanistan and like exposes all the like BS that the American military has done there. And then I'm honestly surprised he's still alive, because he's like uncovered a lot of things. Like he's had interviews with generals where they're like, I can't answer that, and like they like basically like indirectly threaten him, like if you keep digging, like we'll kill you.
You're gonna hit some rough territory.
Yeah. Just like very indirect kind of threats. And he goes on CNN once, and they're like, we have with us Jeremy Scahill, and he just like blasts them, and he's like, you guys have these people on this network that are called terror experts, or like experts in the Middle East or foreign policy, with really they have no credentials, they have no like qualifications to be speaking on the topic, they don't have any on the ground experience, they're just on the board of these like weapons companies, and they're like revving up the fear mongering machine so that they can like make more sales. And I was like, dude, I can't believe you actually said that on live TV and they like didn't cut you, right?
Dude,
Basically,
there's a couple people like that's like what Christopher Hitchens was like. That's like there's another guy like that, like Ben Shapiro. Sometimes they invite him on.
I'm
he's
not a
like
big Ben Shapiro fan.
I'm not. I have like my qualms with him because he's just like too cocky and like just he's kind of like half conspiracy theory, or like just he's just kind of a dick. He's just like he'll ramp up the dick factor. But like I remember one time he was on CNN with who I actually liked, Don Lemon at times.
Oh, I hate Don Lemon, dude.
But yeah, but like that's why I say at times, because most of the time he's just like talking bullshit.
I actually like Anderson Cooper on CNN. Like he's to me one of the last respectable people on CNN.
Yeah, and his colleague, in my view, is Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's like, his writing is amazing. His like just the fact that he just vilifies people on his show, and that's all he does, is just so annoying to me. It's like, dude, like, slow down your reaction and just talk to people. Like, stop being such a
somebody
dick.
like Tucker Carlson, I think he's intelligent, but I think he's just trying to make money. Because
dude, no, yeah, he's a sellout, and he could actually have like a really good show.
And he doesn't even let his guests speak. Like it's
exactly,
it's a charade. The entire thing is a charade.
He'll like get some people on and have a debate with them, but then like if he thinks they're being like disingenuous, if he has any suspicion that they're being disingenuous or they report a wrong fact, he'll just lose his shit on them. It's like, dude, like stop being such a dick and just listen for a second.
Not even like I feel like people like that is like, I mean, like take Ben Shapiro for example. He's a really smart guy. Like I won't discount that at all.
Oh, yeah.
But like, but he, well, like you said, A, he's just such a dick. Like,
such a dick.
And B, like, he contradicts himself in ways, like, he's always talking about identity politics, right? But then he's, like, super proud of, like, his, like, being, like, his Jewishness or whatever, like, as his, like, as he talks about, like, oh, people are always feigning being oppressed and whatnot. Oh, I'm Jewish, like how oppressed we are. And it's like, dude, you realize you're contradicting yourself, right? Like, it's just, it's like, if people would just be, like, okay with being, like, look at me, I'm intelligent, but I'm still open-minded, there would be so much progress, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like I probably try to take, well, I don't know, maybe that's probably not true, but I feel like you're always, like, someone once said this phrase to me, and it's, like, always stuck with me. It's like, you gotta, you always gotta eat the watermelons, but you should always spit out the seeds. like eat the watermelon, spit at the seeds, and it's like, even if someone is like spouting a bunch of bullshit, like if they have one thing that's true, like that thing is still true. So, like that's why I really like all these contrarians who are just happy to say like fuck you. Like I really like them because yeah, they're super contradictory. They have like all these things. Like I'm sure you could go into like Cooper. We could find shitty things about him, but yeah, I love Anderson Cooper. You could find people like even there's so many documentarians and all these people who are like doing really good work, but it's like they they probably fucked someone over. Someone probably thinks they raped someone.
Yeah.
But it's like that doesn't negate the work they're doing. It's just like everyone's kind of shitty.
That's another interesting thing about like take because things would come forward about people and then it would like ruin their career, and some people like totally deserve to have their career ruined. Like who was the dude that owned the LA Clippers and like said basically that he like hated black people, and it's like that guy shouldn't be in charge of that team. He shouldn't have a job or whatever, right?
And then compare him to like Aziz Ansari.
Yeah,
what he did was totally fine. Yeah,
is a great example because Aziz Ansari, somebody basically saed that like
he was too forward.
And people, like, and it's just like, okay, like that's, but I forget. What was it? It was, actually, I think Dave Chappelle has a lot to say on this. That's actually, like, somewhat socially conscious, is that...
Dave Chappelle cuts the line, man. Yeah, he's sick, And he's a comedian, so he's awesome.
He's still, like, he's socially conscious, and he's, like, aware of what's going on, but he still kind of pushes the envelope a little bit. You know?
Totally, yeah. And his shit about, like, trans people and stuff is, like he was dancing with fire with that stuff, man. And
it's like, dude, it's a joke, like if you can't make fun of like I get that like those kind of people should have rights like anybody else, but it's kind of like if you can't make fun of anybody, then like what can you even have comedy anymore?
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah,
it's tough, man, because like I said, it's finding the balance. It's like pushing and then coming back and then pushing and then coming back. Yeah. Because like I said, it's really good that people aren't like, using derogatory language against gay people or black people or like that. That's great. That's progress. But then like the pushback is like where you like people can just have these really like racist ideals. But if their rhetoric is good, you're fine. You're great to go.
I was just going to say, like if you like with the words thing, like it's really interesting because there's sort of this another catch-22 where it's like, okay, I want to be a good person and I want to respect other people. And so out of that respect, I don't go around saying the N-word all the time and stuff. And I don't go around saying the word like, oh, that's gay. Well, I try not to, I don't call people faggots and stuff like that. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm not afraid to use those words because using mouth noises and hearing mouth noises isn't something adults should be afraid of.
Well, it's intent. It's all in the intent.
Exactly.
But if somebody doesn't know you and if somebody doesn't know you and they hear that you say those words, then they might. Then because if I hear you call somebody the N-word, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, that guy's probably racist. I don't know him, but because words do matter,
Exactly.
That's
so it's this balance. It's like you don't want to.
As a writer, where that's the main, like, honestly, if I could summarize, like, the biggest societal problem right now, it's that people refuse to acknowledge that most of life happens in a gray area.
Exactly, dude.
The majority of life occurs in a gray area.
Yeah.
And so people are like, oh, this person did that, so they must be. It's like, no, like, maybe... Because I was thinking about it, and I was like, let's say, hypothetically, that, like, someday I become a great comedian, right? And I'm, like, up there, and then, like, some ex-girlfriend from, like, 2 years ago is like, well, one time he was a dick. And people are like, oh, wow. It was like, I'm probably screwed. I was probably a dick once. Like, because really, if you're going to start just, like,
Bill Cosby's shows are still fucking funny, man.
No, Cosby is, like, an extreme example. Like, Cosby's, like... of a human being.
Louis C.K. still fucking hilarious. I still watch Louis C.K. man.
But I think there's like, and this has to do even like a step further with how people view like criminal justice, right?
Oh yeah.
Because some of these people, like, it's one thing. Okay, if they did something that's like morally wrong, okay, like and there should be consequences, there should be repercussions. But then there's something else. One, do you show remorse, right? And that's the same thing you do with criminals. Like,
Yeah.
if somebody, like, let's say somebody robs a bank, should they never be allowed to live again? No. And that's another thing that I think is interesting, is that a lot of the people that are pushing for things like criminal justice reform is a lot of the same, like hiring felons, like, which is good things, because like felons should be given a chance to work, they should be given a chance to have a job, like,
and they should vote.
It depends. I think it depends. Like, if they're like a mass murderer, then yeah, they shouldn't leave prison. But like, if they, let's say they like pulled a bank heist or something, right? And like they're remorseful, and like people can change, right? But a lot of those people that are the biggest advocates for like criminal justice reform are the same people that like, no, Aziz Ansari's career's over. And it's like, you do realize how hypocritical you're being, right?
Yeah, Louis C.K. coming back is too early. It's like, dude, like he came back the weekend after and said,
well, it's
sorry.
one thing if he's coming back and he's like bragging about it and being like, yeah, I do it again, or if he says, hey, I'm sorry, I did this, I'm trying to learn, you know, then yeah, I don't think his career should be over. But like, it's also interesting about how. So I have these friends in Salt Lake that are actually, they're Muslim, and they started this nonprofit about kind of combating a lot of the negative stereotypes around Muslims. And I'm like, that's great. Like, I would totally support you guys. And that's
interesting in Salt Lake too, because it's such I actually went to Salt Lake this summer.
Oh,
I was like on a.
Should have let me know, dude.
I didn't know you were there. Even I was there with Nathan. Nathan and I were there for like 4 hours in Curry, and we toured the
temple,
the Mormon temple, and the building beside it, the Joseph, or the, what's his name? The
Joseph Smith Memorial.
Yeah, the Joseph Memorial,
really cool,
Memorial Building. That building's like beautiful, man. Yeah, we took some funny photos in there and shit. But dude, like Salt Lake's fucking nice, dude. Like it's a nice downtown. It's really clean. Yeah. But anyway, it's kind of interesting, like that the Muslim this community you're talking about is coming out of Salt Lake. Like, I'm kind of interested in what the dynamic between like the Mormons and all the other religions there is, just because how prominent the Mormon culture is there.
Salt Lake is interesting, just like culturally, in that. So there's actually, so Utah was like the Mormon place, right? And people still think of it as the Mormon place. Yeah. And by and large, it's even Salt Lake and Utah is like two totally different things, because Utah, especially like rural Utah, and like it's super Mormon. Like, just almost everyone is Mormon. But if you go to Salt Lake is one of the most liberal cities in the U.S.
Every metropolis is going to be more cosmopolitan, right?
But the mayor is lesbian, and people are like, "What? The mayor in Salt Lake City?" Because people think Salt Lake City is like wholesome, decent, like Mormonville, right? But Salt Lake has one of the highest gay populations in the U.S., like per capita. I think it was the first lesbian mayor of a major city. Like, Salt Lake is super liberal.
It's all that repression.
It's like, as soon as you go like 20 minutes south, everyone's Mormon.
Yeah.
It's just like,
well, didn't they just elect as their governor? What's his name? He's a really famous guy. He's Mormon.
The governor? Oh, Mitt Romney. No,
Mitt Romney. He's the new governor.
No, he was elected to Congress or Senate. I don't remember which one.
Okay, I don't know. But for Utah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
because he used to be the governor. Governor. I think it was governor. Yeah, and he was the governor of New York, right?
Massachusetts, I think it was.
Massachusetts. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Utah's even really interesting because, I worked in refugee resettlement for a few years, and the Mormon Church was actually really like helpful, because it was around that time when all this pushback was starting to happen towards refugees, and which even refugees, that's another conversation to have, because because I think that like, people failing to dichotomize between asylum seekers and refugees and migrants is just like an atrocity to me. But
you should educate me, because I definitely don't.
So basically, to be a refugee or an asylum seeker, like, people are asylum's different. Like, asylum is, you get, like, Snowden is an asylum seeker in Russia, right?
Right.
Because his life, or the WikiLeaks guy, where is he? He's in like the Ecuadorian embassy in London or something.
Yeah, Julian Assange.
Yeah. So,
Ecuador's right, I think. Yeah.
So those people are seeking asylum, and asylum is you get there and you have your case heard and whatever. But to be a refugee is like one of the most extensive. Like, it takes like 2 years of vetting and stuff. So like, the fact that people are all like afraid of like refugees coming in, it's like, I would be way more afraid of somebody coming in on vacation like getting like a tourist visa, because that would be so much easier.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you really
if
have
you
to
have a contact,
the cause. If
you
pretend to be a refugee for like, you live in a camp for like 10 years, and then you like go, it's like, wow, you really, really dedicated your life to being a terrorist if you pose as a refugee, whereas you could have just like put this alter ego and got a tourist visa and done it like way quicker. But no, I think I got on this tangent from the fact that Salt Lake is really interesting because the Mormon church is kind of like slowly losing its grip of power there, because Mormons are the minority now, but they're still by and large the people in power. Like a lot of the politicians are Mormon, a lot of the people that own the main companies are Mormon. Like, so they're still like, and that's also part of like the Mormons are like, even though maybe theologically they're a lot like, they're not very like puritanical, they like believe in hard work and in family values, and they're very like, but it's interesting
not
because like
social democrats.
There was it Prop 2? Anyways, medical marijuana just became legal in Utah, and that was a huge deal because the Mormon church was so against that. But you can still see the pushback in that it finally won, and even the fact that people voted for it, I couldn't believe that. But secondly, somehow they found some kind of loophole to be like, oh, we're compromising now. And it's like, what? We just voted for that. Like, how can we be voting for that to be legalized? But then you're like, oh, wait, just kidding. Like,
that's like Brexit.
That shows kind of like the fist that they still, because it's almost like they can like, you can see them kind of like losing their power, and they're like panicking about it, or like this was.
So you think it was like the church, like the puritanical
motivations
that caused this?
And this is no like, I have friends that are Mormon, but I'm talking more about like the Mormon church as like an institution, right? Because I'm opposed to like any religious group like having some kind of hold over like government authority. Like, I just think that's BS.
Yeah, we do need to build a wall, but the wall is between the church and the state, right?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, I often think about the migrant problem, that the argument for stricter regulations and the sort of problems are motivated by these sort of terrorist acts, but also the cultural clashings of these groups.
See, this is a really interesting topic, and you could talk about it for a long time.
So maybe we should wait on it, but just like as just to like touch into it, like I often think about the problems of multiculturalism, and multiculturalism is sort of this, cosmopolitan, like sexy idea that, oh yeah, it doesn't matter what you believe, everyone can live together, it's not a problem. But like, just try to live with like your 19-year-old cousin who works at Starbucks in the same apartment, and ask her to be him or her to be as clean as you, and all these other things, and you'll see that minor differences in culture cause problems. And then ask someone who wants Islam to be the majority religion in your country to live next door to you. And it's like, I'm not saying that you can't live together, but like, don't expect everything to be rosy.
Yeah.
So is like the criticism of multiculturalism. So
this is another. The main problem, I think, with immigration is that it's being so oversimplified.
Right. Yeah. No.
And
it's like, hey, we actually live totally different than you. Like, are you sure you want to come here?
Well, so my main thing in this is like, it's because it's, again, there's so many layers to this. It's so layered, and it's so nuanced, and there's really not a one size fits all problem.
No. No. It's a set of problems.
That's how it's discussed in the public forum.
Yeah.
Which is the main problem. But there's a few things, and even I have some cognitive dissonance thinking about this, because if I'm totally forthright, I don't want I love Mexico, but I don't want the US to be Mexico. But I love Mexico. Yeah. I go to Mexico and I visit all the time. So it's really kind of hypocritical, but
your
that's
value systems are based on what you've grown up with. Like, now we get into psychology.
My thing is more, because globalization is the biggest double-edged sword ever. Globalization is great and terrible at the same time.
Absolutely.
And globalization is great, and that like we can exchange information, we can travel, we can like learn from each other so much like faster and more so than before. but globalization is also like McDonald's going up in Cuba, right? Like, and it's just like, it's the thing that I worry about, as I consider myself a xenophile. Like, I'm enamored with cultures, right? Mm-hmm. And what I worry about is cultures dying with how fast globalization comes. Like, even mainstream. I'm not the biggest fan of my own culture. Like, I prefer other cultures to American culture, and I'm fine to say that. But even then, I still think it should exist. You know, like, I don't love it, but I think it should exist.
Well, and also there's things you would take from your culture that are better than how they're done in any other culture, and in the same respect to other cultures, right? Like, you know. So.
Yeah, and I think that the thing about one interesting take on immigration is that it's kind of like the chickens coming home to roost. Like, if you take France, for example. Like, people always use France as like all these Muslims are coming to France, or all these X are coming to France. And the funny thing about France is that a lot of the people that are going to live in France now are all people from the former French colonies. It's kind of like, you get what goes around comes around, right? Like, you go.
But also, like, a bunch of people from majority Muslim countries too, no? Like people.
Well, yeah,
from,
but Algeria, Morocco,
like North Africa,
Lebanon. North Africa was colonized by the French.
Oh,
so, like,
see what I know.
Yeah, and so, like, I mean, they still speak French in Morocco, and in some of, like, the other I mean, like, at one point, the vast majority of the world was either British or French, right? And so the fact that, like, now you're mad that, like, you go and you're like, I felt it was, what was it? It was, I think Trevor Noah did it. And Trevor Noah kills me because I watched his stand-up, and I'm like, dude, I feel like you're, like, mentally stealing my ideas. So, like, if you see a comedian that you feel like you relate to, it's like, I would have made a joke kind of like that, and now people are going to think I'm, like, stealing your work. But
that just means you need to do way more comedy, Chandler.
I guess, yeah, I need to find time, man. It's tough. But,
gotta make that time.
Yeah, I know.
As my mom would say. Yeah.
But one interesting thing is, like, that's one side of it, is it's really, like, well, during World War II, there's these images of all these, like, white refugees from Europe fleeing down to, like, South America, to Africa. And it's like, the world just goes in cycles. And I feel like people have, like, failed to recognize that. Because, like, in France, for example, people from Morocco, take Morocco and Algeria. There's loads of Moroccans and Algerians living in France, and they're from Muslim-majority countries and da-da-da-da. Well, they were like French colonies, so it's like they taught them how to be French, and now they're like, yeah, it's pretty cool being French. Let's go be French. And it's like, well, what did you expect?
You brought your Frenchness to us. Now we're going to bring our Moroccan
what did you think was,
and Algerian cultures back to you.
Like, it's like cultural exchange, and that's even happening like somewhat in Great Britain and other things. And, like, I think for one, because like I said, I love cultures. Like, I love traveling. That's like my life. Like, that's my favorite thing. Mm-hmm. But it's like, it's almost, if there's too much globalization, then we just all kind of become like one thing, and there's no distinction. So the cultures die, like languages die, cultures die. Like, look at ask Native Americans about that, right? Like, I mean, like, who speaks Cherokee anymore? And, like, it's kind of...
Who speaks Greek? No,
yeah.
Like old school Greek? Right?
Yeah. So
cultures revert every 2,000 years.
Yeah, I'm all for, like, globalization, and I'm all for, like, these kind of things, but I think it's hard to know where to draw the line. And because I'm definitely, like, politically, I'm more liberal, but I'm open-minded. Like, I'm not just going to blindly be something, right? And, sure. And I think that people look at it and they're like, well, either we open our borders or we don't. It's like, no. So obviously we have a system that's broken, and I can just use the U.S. So, like, all the people, like, I know people that have grown up here, and they don't even realize till they're, like, try to go get a driver's license. They're like, whoa, I'm an undocumented immigrant. Like, I don't even have documents, right? And it's like, I can't, like, that to me is just like, what? Like, obviously those people, like, let's say you deport that person back to a country that they don't even know. Like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
and
these what's the term they use for those kids? Like the dreamers? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's economically stupid. That's socially stupid. Like, that's just stupid in any way to just, like, mass deport
unfair,
a qualified portion of your workforce just because they're brown. Like, that's blatant racism, really. But at the same time, like, you can't just let anyone who, like this caravan, take that for example. Like, I'm sure that there's people that are like qualified to seek asylum in that, and they should be given that opportunity. And you sure as hell shouldn't like throw tear gas at them. But like, should it be totally discounted that there might be some people there that are not qualified to? Yeah, no, like you should look into that.
This goes
and that's
back,
again,
yeah.
like it's all these nuances, and it's just blanketed
this
black
goes,
and white, and that's the problem.
This goes back to what we were talking about before. Like we have basically one phenomena has caused, it's the root cause of all this, but is the root cause, but there's a bunch of lessons we have to learn in order to address this root cause. So the root cause is the accessibility of information. So before, if you wanted to make a policy, you had to be a policymaker. So you had to take all these courses, you had to have a degree, all these things. You had to understand, in other words, that the world is super nuanced and that every discipline is super nuanced. And then you become an expert in one field, and then everyone says, okay, you're pretty good at this now, we've all kind of agreed. You're going to make the policies, and you're going to make shitty policies because people are shitty. People aren't good at what they do. Like, we're not perfect. We're okay. We do all right, but we're evolved species, and we're trying to predict the future. It's hard to predict the future. You can't do that. What we can, what the problem is, though, with the accessibility of technology, everyone has access to every fact. But as every fact becomes available, it becomes politicized, it becomes misinterpreted, it becomes just all over the place. And so now you have all these uneducated people on the topics which they're talking about having a gut reaction, and your gut reaction is usually not a good gauge of what's true. And this is just like a societal lesson that we're learning. It's just that, like, humility, in other words, like intellectual humility. Like, hey, I it's okay to say you don't know, and just like slow down. I want to ask you
Dude, that's honestly, yeah, like just anybody you watch on anything that talks about like politics, or even who is it, like Bill Nye?
Yeah.
Like, dude, like it's like people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and like Bill Nye would go like host these like science things, like and they would talk like they had the same qualifications. Bill Nye has like an engineering degree, like a bachelor's in engineering, and he's talking like he's like a scientist. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson has like a PhD in astrophysics or something, and it's like you guys are not at the same like playing field, and it's so.
I mean, those are arguments from authority, but yeah, like Bill's arguments are usually like kind of happy-go-lucky, whereas Neil tends to be science, like fact-based. So yeah,
it's just more like anybody who like speaks and like if I am what I say I am is kind of like the world in which we live now, and it's like you can claim to be anything, and okay, yeah, I guess if you say that, you're that. And it's like, it's just people like fact checking, and just I think it's the availability, the rapid pace at which anything is available at our fingertips has made us lazy, like intellectually lazy. I don't want to. People are just lazy now. People don't do
physically
research.
Lazy too.
Yeah.
We're pussies. Yeah.
Well, or like people don't. I don't know, like. It's because like as you know, like robots are going to be able to do more manual labor, and like people aren't going to need to move as much, and they can like ride hoverboards or whatever. Like it's just just laziness. It's
Wall-E life, yeah.
Like, emotionally, physically, like as little work as because you can. The farther into the future we get, the more people are going to be able to do less and still get by.
Yeah,
which is kind of scary if you think about it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's scary from an evolutionary standpoint, for sure. And I think about that a lot. I want to ask you about comedy, though, before I forget, because I know you're getting into it. You've done some stand-up, right?
Yeah, I've had about 4 shows. I've made a total of like $80, I think.
Fuck yeah! That's all. You can take a girl out for that, you know.
I'm a professional, you could say.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, dude. Like, hey, that's a start, right? Do you what's your like? Do you have how much material do you have right now, or like what are your plans? Do you intend to keep doing it?
So since I moved to LA, it's ironic because people even asked me if I was moving here to try to do comedy, and I was like, really?
Yeah.
But
I actually was in LA this summer too, and went to the Comedy Store, and it was awesome.
So, ironically, since I moved to LA, I've really toned it back. Just in like one, I'm like trying to learn this new job, and like Two, it's just the few times I have gone to like open mics or like it's just so saturated. Like every comic here is like, you catch me on HBO, I'm an extra on this show, and like everything is just, it's just kind of like you go places and you don't even feel like sitting through 3 hours so that you can have 3 minutes to do stand up, you know?
So it's like, what's my move here? Like, do I just own how shitty I am? Like, catch me on, I got a phone. You can call me.
Like, I did actually a pretty good set at this place called Ice House in Pasadena.
Right.
And like the cool thing is like comedians come through here like left and right. Like Dave Chappelle even did a show at like some hipster neighborhood in LA.
Nice.
And it was just like, oh, I could have made it if I would have just known. You know, like people are just hanging out, so you can see so many shows. But I did like a pretty good. I thought it was pretty good, and pretty good in the fact that like I remembered what I was gonna say. Like I delivered my punchlines correctly. But then by the time I got up, there was like 10 people in the audience. And if you've already sat through 2.5 hours of comedy, you have to be pretty damn good for people to be laughing at you. You know, like you're just at a disadvantage. And, but I don't have that much, like, I have a lot of like my comedy style is I try to take things from my actual life because I always, and this is something I think about just as a creative person, is that basically everything you try to do has been done before. Right? Like
mostly. Yeah. So you can only take from your experience, yeah.
Yes. So I try to just pull from my own experience as much as possible.
That's the purest way to do it. That's what art is, dude. You got to express your view of the world, yeah.
But this is something that I kind of struggle with because I'm a multicultural person. My dad is from the Philippines and my mom is from the US, and a lot of my comedy is like from my own experiences with cultural diversity, like living in Europe, having family there. But it's hard because you look at me and I just look like if you don't know me, people that know me know I'm not like that. This is another thing with like intent. But if you're just doing stand up and they see a white guy, they're like, who does this guy think he is? Right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's kind of a challenge a little bit. But I also had this friend in Salt Lake, and she was not a comedian. But she would come to all the shows, and I was never really, like, in with the comedians. I would just, like, come do my set and leave, kind of. And she sat me down and was like, hey, like, I want to give you some. And it was kind of just, like, brutally honest. And I was kind of, like, offended, but then it was really helpful. Because it was
That's how good advice always is, isn't it?
Yeah. Basically, I was doing things in reverse. Like, I would deliver my punchlines in, like, the beginning. Or, like, I would. Because I've realized that comedy, more than anything else, is all about, like, it's, you don't even, like, you can make anything funny if you just deliver it and if you know how to read an audience and if you have a good room, like, presence in the room. That's honestly what got me started in comedy. Is for like the longest time I had it in the back. Like, I did comedy once at like a talent show in high school. Like, that's how long I've been interested in it. But I basically took like a 10-year break. Like, I did it once in high school and then I was like, oh, now I should try that again. But I think it was Russell Peters, actually. I went to see Russell Peters in Salt Lake, and I was like, I watched him and I literally thought, like, I could do this. Like, I was just watching him and I was like, why? There's no reason I couldn't do this. Just because stylistically, because he plays off like I'm in Canada, but my dad's from India. Like, he does a lot of like that kind of comedy, but it's easier for him because he's brown. Like, I mean, it's easier for him because he's brown because people can see obviously that he knows he's like qualified to speak on that. It was just like, I was sitting there, I was watching it, and I was like, why can't I do this? And my first time I did like pretty well. Like, I invited a bunch of friends, and it was at one of the bigger venues, and I was like, oh wow, this is easy, right? And then you go, and it's like the first time is the easiest, and every time after that, it's because it's like new material, and you just learn from going. Like,
and then you just eat
I used to think that every time you did stand up, you had to come up with new material. And so it's just like, man, how do people have this much? But then you realize that you're just practicing the same shit for like forever.
Yeah, you just want to work on it, and you want to get really comfortable with it, right? So you can play off the audience and stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of one thing that is sad to me about moving out here. In Salt Lake, like I was kind of getting to like get known a little bit in that scene, and I had shows, and not just in that, but like I was on the like board of certain nonprofits. Like, I was kind of somebody there, and then I come to LA and I'm like nobody.
Yeah, well, it takes time, you know. Yeah, you'll get there. And also social media, dude. You know, like I feel like a lot of the comedians, like I find about so many comedians just off social media. Like, You know Kyle Dunnigan? You know who that is?
I know the name, but I don't.
He
I
like
can't think of the stuff.
he makes all these videos of like him impersonating Trump, but he also does a Trump face swap. So it's like his body, but it's like Trump's. You know how the face swap shit looks like.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It's like a face swap video, except he's just he's just on a phone call, like a video chat with like Kanye, and so it's a face of Kanye and Kyle Dunnigan Kyle Dunnigan's body, but Kanye's face, and then they're having a conversation like, "Oh, hey Kanye, how you doing today? How you doing today, buddy?" And it's like, "Yo, Donald," like I don't know. It's just like it's so you gotta check out his Instagram, but like for example, like that guy I would have never heard about him, and then just like someone shared something to me on Instagram or something, and just like follow instantly, and just like this guy's hilarious, and he's got like he does the Kardashians. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah. But dude, that's interesting, man. It'll be interesting to see. Like, I think the comedy scene is really cool right now. Like, it's so popular and it's such a great medium. And I think the world needs comedy, just because of how despairing the world has become in a way, or how depleted the popular culture is of hope. And but yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, man. I mean, my problem is I just have so many things I want to do and so little energy. I wouldn't even say so little time because, like, really, I have the time.
I just wasted
I
all.
guess concentration. So little concentration and, like, focus.
Yeah, it's hard.
Tired,
it can be hard.
Yeah. I was in school for 7 years after high school. I'm tired.
You fucking break. But then you're complaining that you took too much breaks. So.
I know, dude. It's like... It's that balance. Life's about that. Like that's the thing. Life's about gray areas and balance, but it's just so hard to find. So I guess in that I can relate.
Yeah. I struggle with that too. Like I find I gotta do things like this, like these kinds of things, like help me find inspiration. Talk about soup. Like we've talked for how long? Like 2 hours about stuff that's super interesting to me, but I know like 15 people who are interested in talking about them. So it's like. Mm-hmm. It's hard, right? So, but yeah, building stuff in, it's important, it's tough. So, but dude, I got some grading to do for this course I'm teaching. Yeah, so gotta do some grading, So, but dude, it's been great. We should do it again. We should talk more about multiculturalism and talk about
multiculturalism is to me that's like. Yeah, that's one of the hardest things because it's there's just so many layers to it. Yeah.
But dude, it's been great catching up. Like, I'm really glad we did this. We should definitely do it again soon.
For sure, I'm down.
Cool. And are you okay if I just like throw this up on my YouTube channel?
I don't mind.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay.
Super fun. All right, we'll talk soon, man.
Good stuff, man.
Love you, bro. See ya.
Okay, talk to you later.